would he have had a political future that would have been a threat to the government? I mean, did he ever express an interest in being a political leader?
Vichea never expressed interest that I know of in doing anything other than running the union. However, it is a major political threat when you consider that in Cambodia, which is a very small country, there were some 300,000 garment workers. Most of them are young women between, say, 18 and 22. If you look at the number of young women in that age range that there are, it means that most young women in Cambodia, when they pass through that age range, will be working in a garment factory. It means that they come from all over the country, including the countryside where people don't have a lot of information, don't have access to newspapers, mostly can't read. These young women are coming in to the cities, joining unions, hearing from people like Chea Vichea, learning new political ideas, and then they're going back to the countryside, and they're going to tell their parents and their families about it. So not only is it the union itself as an organization that could put 10,000 people on the street, but also they can spread ideas that will make it ever more difficult for Hun Sen's political party to get reelected. So it's a political force in that way.
Do you know if anyone else has stepped up to take his place?
His brother, Chea Moni, that you saw in the movie, was elected by the membership of the union to take his place as president. And he's still doing that now. But he himself, Moni, the brother, that is, he himself is the first to say that he's not the charismatic leader that Vichea was. So, you know, in a big sense, it was a loss for the union movement. He was a particularly magnetic and charismatic person who brought the union a long way. So, when he was killed, it was a big loss.
Are there some parallels? Are there some parallels, perhaps, to the story of Hoffa here? Is there something where there was maybe a third group involved that, not necessarily a political party, but another force that was not driven by the business owners as well?
Well, the thing in Cambodia is that the power is very centralized, so there really isn't any. There really aren't any other political forces that can do things like this. It's turned into a country where all the levers of power are controlled by one person, and nobody can dare to do something like this that is not driven by the Prime Minister.
What's the state of the opposition parties now? Is Sam Rainey going to run again, or how are they getting stronger, getting weaker?
I would say they're probably not getting stronger or getting weaker. They're being held down to a certain level of activity by the government. So, in the same way that the unions, on some level, helped Cambodia look like it was making progress and being a liberal place, the opposition party and opposition parties also do the same thing. So Sam Rainsy, who has been sentenced in absentia to 12 years in prison and is now living essentially in exile in France, is still organizing politically, but they're not allowed to get to the point where they're a real threat to the ruling party. But the ruling party loves to have them around because they get to say, look, it's a democracy, there's an opposition party. When we have elections, they show up. Rainsy himself says, look, I know I'm a piece of the facade. I know I'm part of the scenery, and I'm helping, in a way, Hun Sen to look as if he's a democratic leader. But the problem is, it's the only opportunity that we have to do any kind of organizing. So when the next election rolls around, presumably the opposition parties will participate, not because they think they'll win, but because the elections provide the only window during which they can do any kind of organizing at all. So they're kind of trapped in a situation where they have to participate in this stage show of elections.
Can I just ask a follow-up? So is that kind of the same situation with the unions then? Are they kind of similarly in that holding pattern that you described? Is that?
Yeah, to some degree.
Ceiling on the.
To some degree, when people try to think of, what's the solution to the problem of Cambodia, how can you make it more of a democracy, the thing that you always run into is that the regime doesn't want it to be more of a democracy, and they will stop these efforts at the level where they start to be threatened. So you can only get so far with it. The government has now introduced a proposed law on trade unions, which is, as it's written now, is extremely restrictive and really is a law that provides the government tools to repress trade unions. So they just want to have more legitimate-looking ways to hold the unions down. But I think on an optimistic note, it's true that the dependence of Cambodia on the garment trade, the dependence of the regime on the garment factories to put money in their pockets is such that they can't afford to get rid of it. And now they have a serious problem. And the problem is, as I said before, this enormous migration of young women into the cities where they can be organized and then going back to the countryside. They've kind of created a thing that they can't stop. So with any luck, stepping out of any pretense of objectivity that I might have been maintaining, with any luck, this contradiction that they've created is going to make it more and more difficult for the government to keep a lid on things. It can't last forever, and we've seen what can happen in Tunisia, and Egypt, and other places, and it's something that the Cambodian government is clearly worried about. We see that they banned this movie because they're worried about it, and we're proud of that. We also see that they put very little coverage. All the radio and TV media is controlled by the government and its friends, and they had little to no coverage of those things that happened in Libya and Egypt. So what that means is they're worried about it.
Sure.
You said that Samdasi party leader, the leader Samdasi stay abroad and got sentenced for 12 years in prison. Why?
It was kind of a complicated story about there was some disagreement about the location of the border with Vietnam, and his party is accusing the government of Cambodia of allowing the Vietnamese government to move its border posts and basically eat up a bit of Cambodia there. So he went with a group of people down and they pulled up some of these border posts. But the thing that he was actually convicted of was falsely disseminating a map, an inaccurate map of the border, and thus endangering national security or something like that, because they put a link to a Google map on their website. So, but the real point of it is that the government now has started to use the courts to get rid of and repress its opponents. So they can, if they want to sue somebody or charge somebody with something to get rid of them, they can do it anytime. They can always find something because they have complete control of the courts. So they can just, make something up or invent some law and use it as they will, so that they can go out and, to the international community and say, oh, look, see, we have a law and they violated it and we're convicted. It's just fine.
Ma'am?
Do you think Cambodia will ever be okay again?
I hope so. I think, nothing lasts forever, and it's one of these things. All we can do is try, and all the people can do there is try, and for the best and more importantly, work for the best.
Well, I appreciate that you made an effort and to disseminating this information. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming. I do want to mention, we have a website. If you want further information, please check our website. It's whokilledcheavichea.com. There are postcards outside where it's written on there. We're having more screenings in the future, and we're also being broadcast on a lot of public TV stations in the next month. So we'll have a link to those screenings, and you can tell people who live wherever how to see it on TV, and you can pre-order the DVD, and you can get on our mailing list so that we tell you what's going on, and so that we'll tell you when something is happening in Cambodia that you can maybe do something about.
And that link again.
And the link again is whokilledcheavichea.com. One last question?
Yeah. So you still have the DVD for this
We haven't made the DVDs yet, but you can pre-order them so that you'll be the first to get it when it's finished, which should be in a month or two.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, a round of applause for Mr. Garella and his fabulous